Etepu and Assalamu alaikum, Namaste. This is Kasak Maya Kipperu with another broadcast for you. And in this broadcast, I want to talk about what color were the ancient Egyptians. Now, I've done some broadcasts on this before, but I want to go a little deeper and touch on some other aspects that I haven't talked about before. Why is this important? What color were the ancient Egyptians? Well, it's not just for aesthetic purposes or fielding purposes. There's a lot of things going on here. I mean, the color directly relates to political issues, and that can impact us globally. And that's how important this issue really is. You know, that's why there's a lot of talk about it, and there's a lot of covering up of certain things in regards to this. But before that, I just want to, you know, it's interesting. You guys see me looking around sometimes. If you ever come to my home, the one thing you'll notice is that things will move or fall down all by themselves. So this place is very heavily populated with spirits, and it's good spirits, you know. But it's just so weird. It's like it's very, very distracting. Sometimes I've gotten used to it, but I'm pretty sure that somebody coming and visiting, you know, freak them out to see all of this stuff going on, you know. And sometimes it can be a bit annoying, you know. You're just trying to mind your own business and things just suddenly fall. And you know, it's like there's no way that could have fell on its own because, you know, it was sitting in a nice, secure location. But it's interesting to know that you can see with your own eyes that there is there are spirits and there is this other realm that mainstream media tries to tell you there isn't. Well, anyway, let's get into the subject matter at hand, which is, so what color were the ancient Egyptians? Again, you know, this is, you know, I was watching, it's a very important topic. I was watching a program today, and it was, what channel was it? Was it like the Discovery Channel or something? And they were talking about the step pyramids, the step pyramid and how it was constructed, sorry. And the one thing that they had mentioned was that they had, you know, no record of this and, you know, all that. Meanwhile, if you look at the hieroglyphics, you can clearly see a record of what the Egyptians look like, all right? And, but when they would do their flashbacks and have their reenactments of the ancient Egyptians building the pyramid or the step pyramid or whatever, it would always be by these Arab actors playing the Egyptians. And when we know that the Arab migration to ancient Egypt was fairly recent, and the Discovery Channel or whoever, is multiple channels that do this, know very clearly that they are not the ancient Egyptians, that the Arabs are a very recent introduction into Egypt. So they take part in this cover-up of a lie. They know it's a lie. And in many cases, it's very evident if you look at the hieroglyphics. If you have any, you know, sense at all, you can see that they're very dark skin hue, the ancient Egyptians. But I'll take it further than just that, because this is a very, very important issue. You have your mainstream Egyptologists who go out there and do all of this research and create this whole category of study called Egyptology, and in which you have this scholarly practice. And if you were to come out and state the truth and the fact of the matter, you'd be ostracized, and your credentials would be taken away. And the truth of the matter is, if you say, well, listen, the ancient Egyptians who started the kingdoms and built the pyramids were actually dark-skinned Africans, immediately you would be under attack from your own brethren. This is how it would work. Because what we don't realize is that there is an effort to cover things up, not for the aesthetics of feeling good that these people were black. That's besides the point. That there is a lot of occult knowledge, and you know, you have to keep in mind that civilization reached its zenith in Egypt, and when they started researching all of this, and excavating the sites, they didn't just come up with gold and mummies. That's just what they want you to know. They came up with a wealth of knowledge about the universe, stars, and things of that nature. And we will never know if they actually did find evidence or information that gives them direct step-by-step procedures on how to build a pyramid. They may have already found this, but told us that they don't know. We know for a fact that they're covering up certain scrolls and sacred writings, that they're keeping this away from the public. Much of it is in the Vatican, in the basement of the Vatican, some of it in the basement of the Cairo Museum. But the fact of the matter is that there's things that they're publicly put out there for the general audience to consume, but the real occult knowledge and science and all of this that the Egyptians practice is hidden behind closed doors. And these are the things they don't want you to know about. And we know that the Egyptians were heavily into interdimensional travel, sound, sonic vibration to levitate stones, and a lot of things, communication with the dead. You know, they knew about different solar systems, different stars before there were telescopes. You know, a lot. They were master engineers. So all of this wealth of knowledge is sitting someplace that we're not privy to. And as I said before, those Egyptologists who had the best intentions at heart, if they were to come out and reveal these things and say these things, they would either be the credentials would be taken away, and they would basically be you know, attacked, or they will be assassinated. That's what's happening. This is why you don't see a lot of them coming out and saying it's very clear that the Egyptians were dark-skinned Africans. And one of the ways that you can tell that they are, because any anthropologist would know this, it's through pragmatism. All right, and this is the studying of the skull. And when you look at the skull, in most indigenous cultures of color, you'll see that the jaw protrudes, and how the brain is sits back and the jaw protrudes. That's a very clear indication of indigenous people of melanin or hue complexion, whereas people of European descent, it's the exact opposite, where the skull comes to the forefront and the jaw moves to the back. So they know this. In fact, it was they were studying Cleopatra's sister, her skull, reconstructing it, and they clearly said it. It was on a BBC program. I'm having like dry mouth here trying to pronounce my words. They said it on a BBC program that the pragmatism in her skull clearly indicated that she was of dark skin or dark hue complexion, or of indigenous culture, that she was not of European descent. So, but what they do is they try to cover these facts up. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper into that, because now why would they just want to cover up the fact that, you know, that they were of a certain color, or because the reason being is because once you open that door, it starts to go down a rabbit hole. You start to realize, well, then the secret to occult wisdom was created by African people, and that we can no longer justify slavery by saying that they are primitive. That world will know why now we're raping and pillaging Africa, because we've come across something that is of information that could revolutionize the world and take us out of the dark ages. We now have knowledge that can take us away from using fossil fuel. You know, all of this stuff. So, and another way to tell about it, if you look at the Egyptians and the traditions and the things they did, this is clearly a people who are right brain or integrated brain thinkers. And remember, I talked about that and I guess I talk about it to death, of how the Egyptians were, indigenous people of color are right brain and Europeans are left brain thinkers, right? Left brain thinkers look at things linearly. They work through the R complex of the brain. Right brain thinkers are congregative in their thought process. They work through synthesis. They're not segregative in thought process. They bring things together. So let's look at, I want to look at some things about this, because one of the things that they try to do to make the cover up, and they throw a lot of things to distract you and cover these issues up about the ethnic origin of the Egyptians. Like one of the things that the Egyptians call themselves the Kamau, right? And it's K-A-M-A-U. And Kam is the, we can trace the etymological root back to the Hebrew term Ham or Hammond, meaning black. So the Egyptians refer to themselves as the land of the black people. But then you have, here comes the Egyptologists who want to come in there and they want to rewrite that and say, no, what they really were referring to was the inundation of the Nile, and it brought up with it the black soot soil, so they called it the land of the black, you know. All right. And the same thing they did to Herodotus, the historian, the Greek historian, because when he went to Egypt, he was an eyewitness account, and he clearly said that the Egyptians were black. But then here you come the Egyptologists and say, no, what he was referring to, and this is not documented, that he actually said that, you know. So they always have an answer for something, you know. Now, one of the things that they did, and another tactic they used, is the whole UFO and alien intervention thing. So if you guys are aware of Akhenaten, and he was, you know, some people credit him with the idea of monotheism. And they said that, well, you know, the way he looks, the elongated jaw and everything, is clearly that he had been alien hybrid, you know, and because he worshipped the sun god, and he was responsible, and coincidentally, as a side note, he was responsible for demilitarizing Egypt, almost to the point of where they got, you know, taken over. But he married Nefertiti, and the Egyptologists went crazy over that, calling her the most beautiful woman in history. And you know, her real name is, you know, I think it's called Neferu Aten. That's her real name, meaning beautiful, beautiful sun disk. That's her name. And so, but the actual story behind that is that, again, I have to point to, you have to understand that your racial makeup is basically comes about through survival, because we adapt, not evolve, we adapt to survive in our climate. So melanin is important because those with melanin complexion have adapted to survive in tropical environments. Those who don't have melanin, meaning Europeans or white people, have lost that. They have a deficiency of vitamin D because they need more sun, you know, and they come from more colder environments where the sun couldn't get through the clouds or whatever, right? So that's very important to understand, and that had a direct impact on which hemisphere of the brain that they focused on. So melanin people focused on, because of the tropical environment, the right brain, and the European focused on the left brain. Now, again, why is that important? So here we go, all right? So Akhenaten, whose real name is Amenhotep IV, but he changed it when, so his wife, so Akhenaten is basically a black African, all right, so get that straight. And if you look at certain tribes in Africa, you will see that there is this plethora of elongated people with the same lips and jaws and long head, entire tribes in Africa that have that same distinction. So these people coming along saying, oh, he must have been an alien hybrid, are stupid, when they can easily do the research and see these tribes in Africa, clearly see these tribes, okay, of black Africans. Now, when he married, Kemet, or Egypt, was always a cosmological nation, meaning that they looked at things in terms of, well, they understood that two things do not directly oppose each other, but they're complementary elements. Whereas a left-brain European culture doesn't look at things that way. It's always polarized. It's binary, meaning that it sees one is right and one is wrong, okay? So in European culture, you have monotheistic idea of one God and that's it. Whereas in many traditional, like you can go to like Mayan, African, even Chinese culture, there is what do you call it? The Portneteru, or the many gods, all right? The many gods who are, yet there's a multitude of gods, but there's still one God, all right? And the Egyptians had no problem reconciling that opposite. So think of it that way. So they had the company, what they call the company of God, the Portneteru, and they said that God, there is a supreme being, the one, who comes in the form of the many. The all are the one, and the one is the all. But that, in terms of the European, is an irreconcilable opposite. They cannot deal with that. So Akhenaten came from that tradition, or Amenhotep came from that tradition, where the priests and priestesses saw things in a cosmological perspective, and that Egypt was riddled with many gods and goddesses. So Akhenaten, or Amenhotep, married Nefertiti, who was a white woman. She was not an African or Egyptian. She was Mittian, Babylonian Mittian, and more than likely a product from the Hyksos invasion. The Hyksos were Europeans who invaded Egypt. So Amenhotep then started looking for wives, and he was picking European white wives. He just liked white wives, or white women, sorry. And he picked Nefertiti. And what came with her? What came with her was left brain monotheistic ideas. So when he married her, that began the whole sun god worship. So he started to slowly transform Egypt, Kemet, from you know, the multitude of, what is it, polytheism to monotheism. And that didn't sit well with the priests at all. This whole idea of one God. And then he did his mass exodus, where he took people out of Egypt to live in some sanctuary to worship the one God Aten. All of this he got from his foreign wife, Nefertiti, who came from that culture, that white European culture of left-brain segregative R-complex thinking, meaning that the R-complex operates from a hierarchy of power, meaning there has to be one at the top and all others are subordinate to that one, where Africans never thought about things like that. This is why when you look at, even today in Western culture, God is to be feared, that you must obey God. And you look at many cultures of indigenous hue complexion, God is one with man or woman. There is a oneness. God is not to be feared. You are God. So that now we have this whole marriage that has taken place that is causing havoc in Kemet. So what happens? Suddenly Akhenaten disappears. And obviously the priests and priestesses said, you got to go. You got to go. We can't deal with this. You're not going to usurp our traditional way of life that has been going on for thousands of years by replacing it with this, you know, Aten worship and religion, you know? So, which I totally understand. And, you know, that's what their job is. The priests and the priests and priestesses, that's what their job is, to protect the integrity, the sanctuary, the culture of ancient Kemet. And what Akhenaten was doing was to destroy all of that. And in addition, by demilitarizing Egypt, he opened it up for foreign invasion. all because he had this love for this one woman who brought in with her culture and all that. Not her fault, you know, but that's how it is. But now this truth about Nefertiti was never revealed to the public. You know, instead what they did was to, excuse the pun, was whitewash everything, because they don't want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it all to reveal to you that it's not necessarily about skin color or race, but it's about the process of how you think that taints your perspective on the science and the culture of everything. When you understand that your skin complexion is a product by your location, by the climate, and that diversity is God's way of ensuring that the human race lives on. Because if you have only one race, it is more open to disease and death. But if you have a diversity among races, then one race can die off and the others will still live. All right? So that's what diversity is there for in the races. But more importantly, when you start to examine what brought Egypt to the heights of morality, the heights of technology, it was the integrated brain thinking, not the left brain. Because they were able to reconcile differences. They took and said, you know what, you're not my enemy. And we can look at these two things and see how, through synthesis, how they are alike. Where again, left brain keeps thinking, all I see is differences. So let's go to war. Does that make sense to you? So the secret, if we want to get down to it, to taking us to higher consciousness or to higher technology, whether in medicine or mathematics or whatever, is through integrated brain thinking. It has to be that way. Because if we continue on this path of left brain thinking, we are going to create more problems for ourselves. And you can see it right now in the world today, how the left brain is creating havoc. And in the story of Asar and Set, this is what the ancient Egyptians predicted. Because when Set took the throne in Egypt, he created chaos. Set is left brain thinking coupled with animalistic urges, the Sahu nature. So when Asar came back to rule and his reign began again, Asar he was known as the Great Uniter, and he wore the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, which is a great symbol of uniting the left and the right brain. Because at one point in time, Egypt went through a civil war where it was, I believe it was the South and the North fought and then was united. And they used that as an allegory for the story of Asar and Set. So all of this kind of ties together. But again, it's when you look at these so-called scholars and scientists of European descent, their agenda is very clear. It is to covet the secret knowledge of the ancient Egyptians, while at the same time putting out there disinformation about them. And that disinformation comes into the form of lying about their race, or interjecting ridiculous and erroneous things like alien intervention, you know, or the worst of them all, and this is very important that you understand this, of painting, you know, people of antiquity as primitive. There was nothing primitive about the ancient Egyptians. In fact, they had more technology, as we want to call it, than we do today. If you look at the hieroglyphics or the Metu Neta, you will see ancient batteries. You will see ancient light bulbs that they were experimenting with. How is that possible? Thousands and thousands of years ago, they had records of them creating flying machines way thousands of years before the Wright brothers even thought of it. So where does that come from? That comes from right brain thinking. And if we want to move into the future and become an advanced civilization, we got to go back to that. We got to go back to that. That's why the priests knew that when Akhenaten started to accept I-Ching, that worship of monotheism, and I don't want to use the word polytheism over polytheism because it really wasn't polytheism, but when he started to accept polytheism, that meant, monotheism, when he started to accept monotheism, that would mean the decline of ancient Kemet, right then and there. Because you are accepting a left brain philosophy, a left brain ideology, and they couldn't have that. Because that was a primitive idea of there's only one God. And just so you know, the gods were not just these deities. They symbolize so much more. They symbolize atoms, cells, they symbolize star systems. So, and it changed throughout the different eras or dynasties. So do the research and you'll find that it's very rich and deep in nature. And even today, when we look at quantum mechanics, they're falling along the same lines. They're falling along the exact same lines. So I hope this answers some questions that you may have had. And I hope that you can see the propaganda that these TV shows put on when they're portraying the ancient Egyptians as Arabs, and why some Egyptologists won't speak out and state the truth about the origin of the ancient Egyptians, because a lot of scientists around the world are assassinated when they try to speak the truth. And you can go on and Google this and look and see a list of scientists that have been assassinated and scholars that have been assassinated. Some university professors who've written papers on subjects like this have suddenly gone missing. So what happened to them? So this is why when you see information that's come out there, understand it's being filtered, it's being censored, and you have to dive deeper than that. And those of you who are Catholic, you must understand that the Catholic Church and the Vatican is holding a lot of information in the Vatican because they want to be the ones to be have the secret knowledge of the universe, So guys, if you love this broadcast, hey, we have a Patreon campaign. Please feel free to donate. You can donate as little as $1. And I'll give you a shout out when you donate. Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and forward it on to friends and family members. So until my next broadcast, this is Kasant Maha Keparu and Amun Ra.